7 days after her husband died, Vesper's mother-in-law threw her out into the pouring rain. They laughed because, according to the will, Vesper only got an old, broken-down house in a forgotten. Her mother-in-law and sister-in-law got the big mansion and the family business. That very night, dragging a wet suitcase and a broken heart, Vesper went to the house she got from her husband. She did not know that inside those rotting walls, she would find something that would change her life forever. But before the story starts, imagine you are hearing this on a storytelling YouTube channel. Leave a comment telling me what city you are listening from, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you stories like this one. So, Vesper's true story began 7 days after Cassius's funeral. Had been 7 days since the body of Cassius, her husband, was put in the ground, but the air inside the mansion was still thick, heavy, almost hard to breathe. It was not because of sadness, because in that house hardly anyone seemed to be sad, but because of the tense wait for the will to be read. Vesper sat on a velvet sofa that felt cold and unfriendly. She wore a simple black shawl that mixed with the shadows of the huge living room. Sitting across from her were Genevieve, her mother-in-law, and Serafina, her sister-in-law. They were dressed in black, yes, but they wore expensive designer dresses, perfect makeup and new jewelry shining on their wrists. But there was no pain in their eyes, only an impatient and greedy look. From the start of the marriage, Vesper had been the daughter-in-law nobody wanted. Simple woman without an important last name or a rich family, who never met her mother-in-law's expectations. The front door opened and the man Vesper only knew by sight walked in. Attorney Sterling, Cassius's personal lawyer, arrived in a stiff suit carrying a leather briefcase that seemed heavier than usual. As soon as they saw him, Genevieve and Serafina sat up straight on the sofa like cats smelling prey. The lawyer sat in a chair facing the three of them and looked at them one by one. When his eyes landed on Vesper, she felt something strange in his look, a mix of pity and a discomfort she could not quite explain. "Good afternoon, Madam Genevieve, Miss Serafina, Mrs. Vesper," he greeted with a flat voice. "I am here by the clear wish of the late Mr. Cassius to read the will he left, which is signed and legal." Vesper's heart began to pound in her chest, not because she expected a fortune, but because she wanted to hear in those final words some sign of love, some sign that she had meant something in his life. Mr. Sterling opened the briefcase and took out a big sealed envelope. He opened it carefully, unrolled several sheets of paper, and began reading long legal words that sounded like faraway noise to Vesper. She looked down at her clasped hands and forced herself to breathe slowly. Finally, the lawyer cleared his throat and said, "I will go straight to the main giving away of things. For my dear mother, Genevieve." Vesper saw a small smile form on her mother-in-law's lips. "I, Cassius, give all of my shares and part of the company Solaris Group with all its things, and also, I give her full ownership of the main house where we currently live with all its furniture, plus 3 fancy cars that are under the company's." Serafina's eyes opened wide and Genevieve's smile turned into a winning grin. They had exactly what they had always wanted. The company, the mansion, the cars, the status. The lawyer continued, his voice getting a little lower. "For my only sister, Serafina." She leaned forward, holding back a scream. "Give my real estate investments, which are a fancy penthouse in downtown Atlanta, along with the money in her name in the savings account." Serafina let out a small squeal. "Oh my God," she whispered while Genevieve looked at Vesper with a look of cruel victory, as if saying without words, "See, you are nothing here." Vesper's cheeks burned. It did not hurt that they kept everything. What hurt was that until this moment her name had not even been said. Had Cassius truly erased her from his life even after death? Did she really mean nothing? Mr. Sterling cleared his throat again, this time much more tightly. "And finally, for my beloved wife Vesper." Her ears buzzed at hearing beloved wife. Those two words hurt like a slap and a gentle touch at the same time. Give the only thing left from my grandfather's inheritance. An old house in the town of Willow Creek in the countryside. The full address is written down. Then silence so deep Vesper could hear the painful beating of her own heart. Serafina broke the quiet with a sharp laugh. Just that? She asked with a voice full of meanness. The lawyer swallowed hard. The will also says, he added, that all of the dead man's personal bank accounts were used before he died to quickly pay different company debts. There is no other money left to give. Well, then something awful happened. Genevieve burst into loud laughter. Not a small fit of nervous giggles, but a long, cruel laugh that bounced off the living room walls. Laughed as if she had just heard the funniest joke in the world. An old house. In a lost little town. She made fun, unable to stop herself. Willow Creek. I don't even know where that hole is. It must be full of chickens and rats. Serafina copied her, laughing out loud. Their laughter mixed, filling the mansion with mocking poison. Cassius sure knew what he was doing, Serafina added. He finally understood your place, Vesper, in a shack far away with the country rats. Tears finally flowed. She was not crying for the money. She was crying for shame. And the worst part was that all of this miserable scene, had been planned by Cassius, the man who promised to protect her. Vesper looked at Mr. Sterling, searching for some explanation, something to tell her this could not be real. But the lawyer hurried to put the papers back in the briefcase, avoiding her eyes. My work here is done, he said quickly. I will give the copy of the will to Madame Genevieve as the main person in charge. He stood up, gave a small bow and almost ran away, as if he knew that what was about to happen would be too dirty, even for a lawyer, used to will fights. As soon as the door closed, Genevieve's laughter stopped. Her face changed. Immediately, her features became hard, cold, and mean. She stared at Vesper as if looking at something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. You heard him, Vesper, she hissed. You are nobody here anymore. They only left you a falling down house. Why are you still here? Vesper stammered, still in shock. But this is my home too. I lived here with Cassius. That was before. Serafina interrupted with a shout. Now this house is ours and we do not plan to share even the air with a bad luck woman like you. Do you think we do not know? Ever since you married Cassius, the business started going down, and on top of that you could not even give him a child. You are useless, Serafina. Vesper murmured, trying to save the last bits of her pride. You have no right to talk to me like that. No. Serafina made fun. What are you going to do? Tell Cassius. Oh wait. No, he is dead. Genevieve stood up slowly and walked toward Vesper, looking her up and down with icy hate. You are leaving this house this very night, she ordered without discussion. What, tonight? Where am I supposed to go? Vesper asked, her voice cracking with panic. To your shack, of course, Genevieve yelled. That town, Willow Creek. That is your place now. Serafina, help her pack. Won't need. Serafina smiled meanly. When she arrived at this house, she only brought one old suitcase. I will go get it. She ran up the stairs toward what had been Vesper and Cassius's bedroom. A few minutes later she came down, dragging the same worn-out suitcase. She did not bother to carry it carefully. She let it drop onto the marble floor of the entryway. The zipper burst open and some of Vesper's underwear and one of her scarves fell out. Pick up your things, Genevieve ordered, and disappear. But it is raining outside, Vesper whispered, looking toward the wet windows. I do not care, her mother-in-law replied with chilling coldness. Without giving her time to react, Genevieve grabbed her arm hard and forced her to stand up. Between the two of them, they pushed her toward the front door. Vesper was so stunned she could barely stand. A door opened and the night air, cold and heavy with rain, hit her in the face. The downpour was falling with endless anger. "Get out!" Genevieve spat, giving her a push so hard that Vesper fell to her knees on the porch. The suitcase flew after her and landed in a puddle, getting even more wet. The heavy door slammed shut, and Vesper heard the turn of the lock from inside. Then, muffled by the thick walls and the noise of the rain, she heard the laughter of both women again. In a matter of seconds, Vesper was completely soaked, sitting on the porch, her clothes sticking to her body and her head wrap dripping onto her face. She cried, mixing tears with raindrops, looking at the house that, until a week ago, had been her home. If days before she was the lady of this mansion, now they had treated her worse than a beggar. With shaking hands, she pulled out the piece of paper where the lawyer had written the address of the house she got in the country, Willow Creek, Georgia. She had no one else, no other place to go. She could not stay there lying on the ground. The pain from Cassius's betrayal and the cruelty of her in-laws turned into a spark of anger that gave her back some strength. Stood up with effort, grabbed the wet suitcase, and began walking in the rain, moving away from the mansion toward the main road, determined to get to the bus station however she could. The bus station looked like a small hell on earth. The air was filled with the smell of bus fuel, sweat and piled-up trash. The honking of buses and the shouts of workers mixed into an unbearable roar. For someone like Vesper, who since her marriage had lived in a clean and controlled place, that spot was a brutal crash with a reality she had forgotten. Everyone stared at her. Woman with a wet head wrap, clothes stained with mud, dragging a nice dirty suitcase, seemed like a being out of place. She finally found the window selling tickets toward the southern counties, and asked in a rough voice for the town of Willow Creek. The clerk frowned. "The bus does not go all the way to the town, ma'am," he explained. "The closest stop is a turnoff before getting to the main town. There you will have to look for a ride. Maybe a local with a truck if anyone is still out at this hour." Vesper had no other choice. She bought the ticket with almost all the cash left in her wallet, the same money she had set aside a few days ago to buy fresh flowers for Cassius's grave. The irony was just one more blow. The bus was the cheap kind, old, hot, and crowded. Vesper managed to get a seat next to a cracked window, put the suitcase at her feet, and hugged it as if it were the only piece left of her old life. The bus started moving, leaving behind the cruel lights of the city. The trip was a long torture. Every bump in the road felt like a blow to her chest. The rain kept falling, drawing lines of water on the glass. Vesper rested her forehead against the cold window, and her mind filled with questions. Why, Cassius? Why did you do this to me? The memory of her husband cut her like a knife wound. She tried to remember him in his good days, not the pale and quiet Cassius of the last 6 months. She remembered the man who looked at her with love on their wedding day, the one who always defended her at the table when Genevieve made her feel small, the one who brought her hot soup when she got sick. Had all of that been a lie? Had it been just a part he played until the end? Because the will, with its cruel giving away, seemed like clear proof that in the end he wanted to get rid of her. Tears fell again, this time in silence. She did not want to get the attention of the other people on the bus. She cried, holding back sobs until her chest ached. Then, like lightning in the middle of the darkness, she remembered a conversation from 6 months ago when Cassius had just gotten his diagnosis, and they were still keeping it a secret. They were sitting in the back garden of the mansion, looking at the small fish pond. Cassius seemed far away, staring at the water. Vesper said suddenly with a rough voice, "If I ever do something that hurts you, something that makes no sense to you, promise me one thing." She took his hand, which was already a bit thinner. "What thing?" she asked him. "Whatever happens, trust me." He looked her directly in the eyes. "May have to make very hard choices, but everything I do will be to protect you. Never. Forget that. In that moment, Vesper thought he was talking about treatments, maybe. Refusing some strong therapy. She squeezed his hand and replied, I always trust you. Remembering that now felt like a bad joke, protecting her by throwing her to a cruel mother-in-law and giving her a ruined house in the middle of nowhere. Those words felt empty, almost like one more betrayal. The sun was starting to peak out when the bus finally slowed down and stopped at a lonely crossroad in the middle of farm fields. Willow Creek Junction, shouted the driver. Vesper stood up with her body numb, stepped down with the suitcase, and watched as the bus pulled away, leaving her alone in that lost spot. The morning air was cold and clean, very different from the city. There was only a small wooden convenience store starting to open its doors. The older man working there watched her with curiosity. You looking for someone, miss? He asked. I am looking for the town of Willow Creek. Do you know where it is? Vesper replied with a voice barely heard. The man pointed to a narrow road full of mud. Straight down that road about 3 miles. But the road is awful. After the rain, no cab is going to go in there, he added, shaking his head. There is an old house in the town, a big house that has been empty for years, Vesper insisted. The man thought for a moment. That house. Folks call the haunted house. Yes, the big one at the end of town. It belongs to city people who never came back. That is the one, he said with a certain superstition in his voice. Vesper's heart sank. Haunted house. Sounded so right for her luck that she almost laughed at the silliness. Still she thanked him, took a breath and started walking. The road was torture. The wheels of the suitcase were useless in that thick mud. She had to lift it, take a few steps, let it drop, breathe and try again. Her head wrap, which was starting to dry, got stained with mud splatters, and her clothes stuck to her. Buddy. After more than an hour of walking between cornfields, she finally saw the entrance to the town with a rusted sign. Welcome to Willow Creek. It was a small, quiet place. Some women were hanging laundry and watched her without hiding it, whispering among themselves. Vesper could feel those looks stuck to her back as if she were a strange show. A city woman covered with a head wrap and dragging a nice suitcase down that country road toward the haunted house. She followed the path to the end of the town, where the houses became fewer and the trees taller, and there, hidden behind overgrown plants, was her inheritance. Old house was too nice of a term. The thing looked like a ruin about to fall down. The paint had peeled off almost completely, showing rotting wood planks. The yard was taken over by tall grass that reached her waist. Several windows were broken, leaving black and scary holes. The roof had so many leaks the sky could almost be seen through it. This was what Cassius had left her. This was supposedly her protection. Vesper let herself fall onto the damp ground in front of a half-fallen gate. She had no strength for anything else. She wanted to cry, but she had no tears left, only a huge emptiness and a tiredness that went into her bones. Genevieve and Serafina had won. They had the mansion, the cars, the company. She had a pile of old trash. She sat there for a long time, letting the mosquitoes bite her, letting sadness wrap around her chest. For a moment she thought maybe it would be better to die there alone than to keep dragging this pain. Then, with her head bowed, something white among the weeds on the porch caught her attention. It looked like a flower. No, it was not a wild flower. Vesper stood up slowly and went closer. In a corner of the porch, in a cracked clay pot, grew a small jasmine bush. Unlike everything else, the jasmine seemed well taken care of. Leaves were a bright green, and a few buds were already releasing a soft, sweet smell. That smell hit her with an immediate memory. The same smell as the jasmine-scented candle Cassius had given her 6 months earlier. And then a more distant memory pushed its way through. One night watching a movie together about a couple who lost everything and ended up living in a shack. Cassius had joked, If we ever go broke and have to live in a shack, do not worry, he said, laughing. I will hide the key to our secret house in the safest place, under a pot of jasmine. Vesper had laughed with him then, thinking it was a silly joke. Now, with the smell of jasmine filling the air, her heart started beating with crazy force. Could not be. It had to be a coincidence, but her hands were already moving on their own. She pushed aside the grass around the pot and grabbed it with both hands. It was heavy, but she managed to slide it a little to the side. Underneath, between the cracks of the porch tiles, she saw something metal shining. Vesper's fingers trembled so much she almost dropped it. It was a large brass key, old and a bit rusted. She looked at the key in the palm of her hand and then looked at the main door of the house. It was locked with a huge padlock. The sadness that had crushed her began to go away, replaced by intense confusion. This was not a mistake or a coincidence. The jasmine pot, Cassius's joke, the key. Everything was too planned. She stepped onto the porch with unsure steps, put the key into the padlock, and with all the effort she had left, turned it. A loud click sounded, followed by a sharp squeak. The padlock opened, and the door gave a few inches. Vesper pushed with her shoulder until she opened it completely. A cloud of stale air and old dust covered her immediately. The inside was dark with that clear smell of rotting wood. Mixed with that, there was another barely there smell that made her stop dead in her tracks. The smell of old paper and pipe tobacco, the same smell that filled Cassius's private office in the mansion. Vesper crossed the doorway, dragging the suitcase, turned on her phone flashlight. The battery was almost dead and she aimed the light toward the wide entryway. The furniture, covered by white sheets, were piles of gray dust. Spider webs hung from every corner. Every step she took made the floorboards creak. It was clear the house had not been lived in for many years. It truly looked like a haunted house, just as the store owner had said. She went down the hall to a darker hallway, without thinking, following that faint familiar smell. At the end of the hall there was a door different from the others. She pushed it and entered what must have been an office. But this room was not like the rest. There was dust there too. Yes, but everything was relatively neat, as if someone had used it recently. There was a large solid wood desk, a leather swivel chair, shelves full of folders and books. On the desk, an empty ashtray where the trace of pipe tobacco could still be smelled. Vesper felt a chill. Cassius had been here. He had spent hours in that secret office in the middle of that lost town while everyone believed he was only going to treatments and meetings. What was he really doing in this place? She raised the flashlight and pointed it toward the walls. Then she saw it. Hanging on the wall right in front of the desk was a painting that did not match everything. It was a modern oil painting in a black frame showing a cloudy city and a big bridge crossing a wide river. London Bridge. Vesper went closer. She never knew Cassius had an interest in art, and even less in a painting of London. Why hang a piece like that in this falling down house? Touched the frame. It was heavy and solid. She tried to lift it and saw it did not move. It was not hanging from a simple nail. It seemed set into the wall. Curiosity beat tiredness. She checked the edges, pressed different spots on the canvas like in the spy movies Cassius liked so much. When pulling carefully on the bottom part, she heard a small click, and the painting swung open like a small door. Behind it was a metal safe set in the wall with a digital number pad. Vesper took a step back, her heart racing. This could no longer be a coincidence. The shame of the will, the key under the pot, now a safe hidden behind a painting of London. Everything was a plan. She looked at the keypad of the safe and felt a stab of urgency. Her phone battery was blinking red. She had to act fast. She tried Cassius's birth date. Beep. She tried her own birth date. Another error. She tried the date they met. Nothing. She started getting nervous. What other date would be important to him? She looked at the bridge painting again. There did not seem to be clues. And she thought of something so obvious she felt silly for not trying it before. Their wedding date, the day their lives, in theory, had truly begun. With trembling fingers, she typed the 6 digits of that day. The pad let out a long, pleasant beep, and a mechanical click was heard. A green light turned on. Vesper held her breath and pulled the heavy metal door. The inside was almost empty. There were no stacks of cash, no gold bars, no papers for secret mansions. Only 3 things. Medium-sized bottle of water, a package of whole grain crackers, and a brown envelope, small and wrinkled. Disappointment hit her so hard her legs almost gave out. That was it. Water. And crackers. Did Cassius really think she was going to starve to death there? Still, she took the envelope with impatient hands. It was thin. She ripped it open in one go. Inside was not a letter or a check, but a sheet of thick paper with the logo of an international airline, a plane ticket. Vesper read it. Once, then again, not believing what she saw. It was a first-class ticket, one way only, from Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson to Heathrow, London, in the name of Vesper Vance. Departure date the next morning at 6:30 a.m. Vesper let herself fall onto the dusty floor of the office with the ticket in her hand. That very moment her phone died, plunging the room into total darkness. She sat there with her back against the desk and the ticket between her fingers. Cassius not only knew they would kick her out, he knew when he had figured out the day of the will reading, the time it would take to get to this house, and the exact time for her to find the safe and the ticket before the flight. This was not a punishment or an abandonment. It was a perfectly timed escape planned by someone who thought like a planner. The pain in her chest was replaced by a wave of confusion. Her husband was not the simple man she believed him to be. He had deep secrets, and the key to those secrets was apparently in London. That night was the longest of Vesper's whole life. She did not sleep a second. She stayed in the office chair, hugging her knees, listening to the creaks of the house, the howling of the wind, the sounds of animals on the roof. In other times, the sound of running. Rats would have made her run away screaming. Now it did not even scare her. In her hands the plane ticket felt like ice and fire at the same time, cold because of the silliness of the situation, burning because of the faint light of hope it started. Her mind went over the choices over and over. Could stay there. She had a bottle of water and a package of crackers. After that, nothing. Sell the ticket. Impossible. She was in the middle of a lost town without contacts, without easy way back to the city, and there were less than 12 hours until the flight. She could also go back to the city and beg for help. From whom? Had no family left. Her mother had died long ago. Her friends belonged to the same group of people who would already be whispering about the silly giving away of the will. Most they would turn her into one more piece of gossip. Ask Genevieve and Serafina for forgiveness. Just imagining their laughter. The memory of the suitcase thrown into the puddle made her feel she would die in that house before crawling back to them. Third choice was the craziest of all. Fly to London. She had no money, no good clothes, and knew no one there. She would arrive in one of the most expensive cities in the world with just the clothes on her back and a head wrap on her head. But then she thought of the bottle of water and the crackers. Understood they were not simple food, but a silent message. You're going to be hungry. Eat this before the trip. You are going to need it. And the first-class ticket was not a whim. It was so she could rest, so she would be treated well on the way. When the house began to lighten barely with the first pink light of dawn, Vesper forced herself to move. She felt around in the darkness, until finding the outlet on the office wall. If Cassius had used that place as a hideout, surely he had made sure there was electricity. She looked for the charger in her purse, plugged it in, and at first nothing happened. She was about to cry again, but suddenly the phone screen lit up and the battery con showed it was charging. Vesper stared at the small flash of light, unable to decide whether to laugh or cry. Cassius had paid the electric bill for this lost house. He had thought of everything. She let the phone charge for a few minutes, turned it on, and as she did, a bunch of notifications flooded the screen. Many messages were from people pretending to be sad, but really wanting to gossip about the inheritance. She ignored them all. Only one message made her go still. Came from an unknown number with a UK country code. It had arrived 2 hours earlier when she was still on the night bus. It read, "Your husband asked me to make sure of this. Come to the airport. Bring nothing but your ID papers. Everything is arranged. Your ticket is in the safe behind the painting. The code is your wedding date. We are waiting for you in London." Vesper read the message once, twice, 5 times. Her hands trembled so much she almost dropped the phone. "We are waiting for you." It was not just one person. There was a we waiting. Someone who knew about the safe, the combination, the ticket, someone who worked for Cassius. Suddenly, all doubts went away. It was no longer a choice. It had become a must-do. It was the path her husband, sick but clear-headed, had made as his last wish. She heard those words in her mind. Again. "Whatever happens, trust me, everything I do is to protect you." For the first time since the will reading, the meaning of the words began to change. Cassius had not protected her from Genevieve and Serafina by avoiding them. He had used them. He knew they hated her, and that if they believed she was worth nothing, they would kick her out without thinking. He knew they would not just make her feel small, but they would throw her out that very night. He turned their cruelty into the perfect start to set the escape plan in motion. The town, the ruined house, the safe, the ticket, the message, everything was part of the same plan. Vesper stood up. The physical tiredness was still there, but it was drowned out by a wave of adrenaline. Through a dirty window she saw the sky. On the horizon starting to get light. The flight was at 6:30 in the morning and the airport was at least 3 hours from there. She had to leave right away. Took the bottle of water and the package of crackers and put them in her purse along with her ID and her old passport, which by some strange feeling she had never taken out of her suitcase since the last time they traveled. She looked at the wet suitcase and everything it stood for. Her clothes, her scarves, the material pieces of her old life. The message had been clear. Bring nothing but your ID papers. She closed the suitcase and left it in the middle of the office. Left the house, closed the door, but did not put the padlock back on. At the entrance of the town, she stopped for a moment. She took the paper with the address the lawyer had given her out of her pocket, and with a box of matches she had found on Cassius's desk, burned it. She watched as the paper turned to ash and blew away with the morning wind. There would be no going back. She started running, or something like running, toward the road turnoff. Way back was the opposite of the trip the night before, but filled with a different energy. From the turnoff, she managed to get a local man with a beat-up pickup truck, who looked at her with curiosity and distrust to agree to take her to the nearest bus station. She paid him with almost all the money she had left. In her wallet only a few small bills remained, not even enough to buy a bottle of water at the airport. She got on the first bus, going to the city, even though it was packed. She stood near the door, holding on to the bar, trying to ignore the smells and the stares. The only thing that mattered was the clock on her phone, whose battery she guarded with desperation. She had to get to the airport before 6. The morning traffic in Atlanta was terrible. Times the bus barely moved. Every minute seemed like forever. Finally the bus arrived at the terminal in the city. Vesper got off even before the vehicle stopped completely and ran toward the area where cabs and ride-shares waited. "To the airport, please, fast. I am about to miss a flight," she said, panting to a driver. Then she froze. She had almost no money left. "Please, I am begging you. I lost my wallet at the airport. I do not know how, but I will pay you." The man looked at her for a moment, judging the dirty head wrap, the worn clothes, and the bloodshot eyes of that woman. Maybe he saw a desperation too real to be fake. He nodded. Get in. We will try to make it. The cab cut through the cars like an arrow. Vesper closed her eyes and prayed in silence, not counting the time anymore, only the wild beating of her heart. She arrived at the departure entrance half an hour before the last call for her flight, according to the lighted board. She got out trembling, thanked the driver, and promised him that someday she would find a way to pay him back. She ran into the shining terminal, which contrasted painfully with her appearance. Her head wrap still stained with mud, her clothes wrinkled and damp, her face pale and tired. She noticed people staring at her, how some subtly moved away. She did not care. She searched for the airline counter whose name was on the ticket. The first-class area was almost empty. Perfect employee, with perfect makeup and expensive perfume, smiled at her automatically, but her smile froze a little upon seeing her closer. Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you? She asked with professional politeness, but with eyes judging her up and down. I am here to check in, Vesper managed to say, holding out her passport and the printed copy of the ticket she had found in the safe. The employee took the papers, looked at the ticket, then at Vesper, then at the computer. She typed for a few seconds, frowning. Vesper held her breath. The ticket did not show up in the system. If something failed, it would all be over. The woman read aloud. In the name of Mrs. Vesper Vance, flight to London first class departure at 6:30. She raised her eyes. No checked bags. Just this purse, Vesper replied, pointing to the light bag she carried against her body. The employee's face tensed. A woman looking destroyed. First class one-way ticket. No bags. It was a mix that would set off every alarm for any worker. The worker picked up the phone. Please wait a moment, she said, speaking softly into the receiver while still watching Vesper as if she were a puzzling problem. A middle-aged man in a better-cut suit appeared right away. He seemed to be the boss. He spoke for a few moments with the employee, looked at the screen, and then looked at Vesper. Good morning, ma'am, he greeted politely. We have checked your booking. It is fully paid and confirmed, but it is an unusual booking. First class one-way, no bags. My late husband set everything up, Vesper murmured. 'Tis an emergency situation. Must go. The boss stared at her. Maybe he saw the real sadness in her eyes, or maybe he read some special note in the booking system. Finally he nodded toward the employee. Process the boarding, he ordered. The employee printed the boarding pass, a thick card, and handed it to Vesper. Here you go, ma'am. Gate of 8. You also have access to our VIP lounge, she said, still confused, but without asking more questions. Vesper took the card as if it were a life preserver. She went through security, then the checkpoint. The agent looked at her passport and the one-way ticket with suspicion, but in the end stamped it. She had made it. She followed the signs to the VIP lounge. Entering, there was like bursting into another world. White seats, soft lighting, people in expensive suits reading newspapers or working on laptops. An elegant silence filled with quiet talking. Everyone looked at her, some with curiosity, others with dislike, but she only looked for the bathroom. In the private restroom, she locked herself in and looked in the mirror. The woman staring back seemed like a stranger, pale, tired, eyes swollen from crying, and the head wrap a. She turned on the hot water tap, washed her face and hands, removed the mud stains she could from her dress, and fixed her head wrap as best as possible. She did not look good, but at least she looked human. She came out of the bathroom just as the final call for her flight was announced over the speakers. She walked toward gate F8, handed over the boarding pass, and heard the employee say, "Have a good flight."